We'll also discuss a new campaign on food from the Mothers Manifesto and look back at the career of one of the most controversial American politicians of modern times, Dick Cheney. Busy evening? Join me after the news.
On your radio, on the LBC app, and
Play LBC.
Leading Britain's conversation. This is LBC.
From Global's newsroom at 6 o'clock, Rachel Reeves has refused to say whether she will keep Labour's manifesto commitments at her budget later this month. The Chancellor has declined to rule out tax rises, but insists she'll do what she can to bring down interest rates and government debt. The Tories say her job will be untenable if she breaks those pre-election promises, but the Mayor of London, Sir Sadiq Khan, has told LBC she inherited a mess.
What's really important is for the Chancellor to address the consequences of not just 14 years of austerity, but the hard Brexit we have with the European Union, the long consequences of the pandemic.
And we'll hear from the Chancellor after this bulletin. There have been tributes to a railway worker who helped save passengers during Saturday night's knife attack on a train in Cambridgeshire. Sam Zitouni's been called a hero by LNER. His family say they're immensely proud of him. He remains in hospital. The government says the BBC is looking at a report claiming it selectively edited a speech by Donald Trump on the day of the Capitol riot. It says a panorama programme before last year's election could have misled viewers. The RMT says it's won a 3-year pay deal on the London Underground following strike action and negotiations with the employer. The union also says it has secured commitments addressing the work-life balance for staff. In the city, the FTSE 100 was trading up at the close of play. I'll give you the full figure at 7. The pound buys $1.30 and €1.14. LBC weather, cloudy tonight with rain moving eastwards, clearest in northern Scotland, and a low of 6 degrees. From Global's newsroom for LBC, I'm Tim Humphrey.
This is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation. It's 6 p.m. Now, Tonight with Andrew Marr.
Good evening. This has never happened before. Certainly, I can't remember a Chancellor of the Exchequer giving a televised speech, a press conference and interviews just 3 weeks before her budget. What is going on? Perhaps Rachel Reeves has seen all the secret numbers and she's going to raise taxes in such a painful way she feels she has to speak to us, the public, to prepare us for the horrors ahead. Or perhaps she thinks things won't be quite that bad, but hopes that by spreading gloom now, when the budget actually happens, the country will sigh with relief and she'll look like a genius. There is always a danger amidst all this speculation that journalists become witting players in a game of public disinformation. But then again, perhaps Rachel Reeves is thinking more about the markets, reassuring them she's going to be tough and helping keep the cost of borrowing down. And indeed, the gilt market responded quite well this morning, although the pound was down a bit. Then again, she's speaking as well to her own colleagues, the Labour Party in Parliament, subtly warning them that in these serious moments for the country, they're going to need discipline and loyalty to help get all of us through. So many possibilities. If only we could ask her to explain. Well, tonight we, or rather I, can, because the Chancellor has given LBC an exclusive interview in Downing Street, and here it is. Chancellor, can I ask, in a sense, why we're doing this? I can't remember any Chancellor who has done a big speech and press conference and so forth 3 weeks before a budget. What is it you're trying to achieve?
So I want to be honest with people, level with people about the challenges we face. This is a great country. It's a country that businesses are queuing up to invest in. It's a country where other nations around the world are queuing up to do trade deals with us. But I think people recognise that the last few years, our economy's been through the mill. We had austerity, then we had a botched Brexit, we had Liz Truss's mini-budget, and then, of course, there's external events like the COVID pandemic and Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Now, what I set out today is what will be the biggest part of the budget, which is the Office of Budget Responsibility's reassessment of productivity. Now, it sounds very technical, your view of total factor productivity, but it actually has real meaningful consequences for the economy and the public finances.
For the country. Let's be absolutely straight. You are going to have to raise taxes.
Well, look, I think I was pretty clear
means,
today that the productivity downgrade it's not that I accept that productivity has to be like that. I'm determined to defy those forecasts, but you can't just sideline a forecaster because, we know what happens when you do that. That's what Liz Truss and Kwasi Kwarteng did, and it caused absolute misery because interest rates went up, inflation went up, and ordinary working people paid the price for that. So
we have all been there before. We know that's a real problem, but the truth of the matter is you want to turn things around, you want to get productivity up, but in the short term at least, you have to raise taxes.
Well, I'm going to set out the individual tax policies and on spending as well at the budget. That's not what today was about. I'm
not asking about individual measures. I do understand that. I'm just asking overall, in terms of borrowing and the macro picture, you have to raise taxes.
Well, I think I was pretty clear today that the circumstances that we had a year ago, they are different today because of this. And I've been clear, there's not going to be a return to austerity. We're not going to cut capital spending because that's what previous chancellors did, and that's why we have such weak productivity. And I'm not just going to borrow more. And so, of course, we are rooting out waste and inefficiencies in public spending. But of course, we are going to look at taxes as well. But I'll set all that out. What I wanted people to know today is the principles that will guide me when I make those decisions. Getting NHS waiting lists down, getting the cost of living down, and getting our national debt down. Those are my priorities, and I hope people will judge me against those at the budget in a few weeks' time.
In terms of principles, because that's absolutely crucial, I've noticed a big change in language. You used to talk all the time about those with the broadest shoulders. And today you said, if we are to build the future of Britain together, we will all have to contribute to that effort. Each of us must do our bit. Can you decode that for me?
Well, I will set out the individual measures and you can judge me on those, but I'm a progressive. I believe those with the broadest shoulders should pay the most. And I think you can judge me on my record, Andrew.
Of course.
Like the budget last year, we got rid of the non-dom tax, so you can no longer be a non-dom. There's no such thing now in the tax code. With taxes on VAT, business rates on private schools, taxes on private jets, increasing capital gains tax, getting rid of the carried interest loophole for private equity.
But now your language has changed. Now you're talking,
I wouldn't read too much into that, to be honest.
You're saying each of us must do our bit. If there was a more blunt way of saying, I'm going to raise income tax, I can't think of it.
Well, look, I will do the individual measures, and that's not what today was about. That's not what I was trying to do today. But of course, I will want people, when they look at that analysis of the distributional impact of the budget, last year's and this year's, I want people to see that I am a Labour Chancellor, progressive Chancellor, and that distribution analysis will back that up.
Last year, almost to the day, you said this: we are never going to have to do a budget like this again. This was a once-in-a-parliament reset. What has changed in just a year?
Yeah, so look, that was a once-in-a-parliament reset. When I became Chancellor, there was a black hole in the public finances. The reserve, which was supposed to be for genuine emergencies, was spent 4 times over just 3 months into the financial year. And that is what I was sat down and told by the most senior officials at the Treasury in my first weekend in the job. And so I had to fill that black hole. Because
so this won't be as bad, if you like.
No, and it also is a very different circumstances. Last time I was, clearing up that fiscal mess. But last year I did a budget in good faith based on the productivity numbers produced by the Office of Budget Responsibility. A Chancellor can only do their budget based on the independent forecasters. And since then, they've done a reassessment and they'll set out why that is and why this was the time to do it, and also the extent of that reassessment. But what that reassessment consists of is looking at data from the past and seeing whether it was stronger or weaker than what they forecast. And I think you can see the data for yourself that productivity has come in lower than they expected over the last few years. And they use that past data to predict the future. Now, we shouldn't be defined by our past. I believe that we can beat those forecasts. I'm determined to do so, but I have to prove that before I can bank on it. And that's why I always say, continue to say, my number one priority is to grow the economy with good jobs and productivity in all parts of the country. But we've got to deliver that growth. We've had the fastest growing economy in the G7 in the first half of this year, but growth is not yet strong enough. We need to double down on that with the planning reform, the regulatory reform and the pensions reform.
If you loaded taxes on business, you would kill any chance of getting that growth in the year ahead.
Well, taxes isn't the only thing that affects business sentiment and business investment. You know, there was a lot of scare stories a year ago when we increased national insurance, and I recognise that was...
Employment has gone down, hasn't it? A lot of people have stopped hiring because of that.
Actually, employment this year in 2025 is 350,000 higher today than it was at the beginning of the year. Retail sales for the last 4 months have improved. They've surprised on the upside, and the IMF just last month revised up their forecast for growth for the UK this year and say we're going to be the second fastest growing economy in the G7 for this year as a whole. So I wouldn't believe all the doom and gloom. There's loads of brilliant stuff going on in our country. Businesses hiring people, businesses investing, and businesses from abroad choosing Britain as a place to invest. And the trade deals that we've done now means that you can produce stuff in Britain and sell it on the best terms all around the world.
What I don't want to do is to get into the silly game where I ask you about lots of taxes and you say, Andrew, you're going to have to wait to the budget. So I'm not saying that.
Oh, good.
But I am saying that you and the Prime Minister made some very solemn promises to the British people at the time of the election. If, hypothetically, you break those promises, you will never get that trust back, will you?
I think people want to understand what we're doing and why. People voted Labour last year because they were sick to the back teeth of the previous government and their mismanagement, and then putting party interest above the national interest. Now, I'm sure that I could fiddle the numbers and move things around to meet the letter of the rules, but not the spirit of them.
You could dodge through, but you're not going to dodge through.
You know what I could do, and it's what previous chancellors do. They say that big capital project, the nuclear power station, the Northern Powerhouse rail, the 1.5 million new homes.
Put it
back a couple of years. Massage the figures. Of course, you could do that. Chancellors have done it before. Do you know why we're in the mess we're in now? Because that is what they did. And I am not going to do that, because one day I won't be in this office, Andrew. One day I won't be in this office. I won't be Chancellor anymore. And I want people to look back and what did Rachel achieve when she was Chancellor of the Exchequer? And I want to have left this country in a better state. And that is something, frankly, that the last two Chancellors haven't been able to say.
On that very theme, let me say something that interviewers don't normally say, which is that I think of all the bad choices that may be ahead of you in terms of taxes, actually raising income tax for everybody by a modest amount may be the least bad choice you could make. However, you did make that promise, as did Keir Starmer. So it's been suggested to me what you could do is you could say to the British people on Budget Day, look, things are really bad. The headwinds have been harder. The situation has been stronger, worse than I thought. Therefore, I have to raise income tax. But I promised you I wouldn't. So tomorrow, I'm going to resign as Chancellor of the Exchequer, having done the right thing. That would be. I'm not going to behave like the last lot. I'm not going to play those games. I'm going to be honest and honourable.
And what do you think would happen in financial markets if I did that?
It depends who took over, I guess.
Oh, come on, Andrew. You know, look, I've been able to build a reputation
You'd have done
that
the
I
right
can be
thing.
Trusted with the public finances. I've steered this country, our economy, through some challenging times the last 15 months. Increases in global tariffs, increases in volatility, increased tensions around the world, and yet our bond yields are lower than they were a few months ago and have outperformed our peers. The FTSE is close to record highs. Our economy in the first half of this year was the strongest growing in the G7. So I am not going to walk away because the situation is difficult. I was appointed as Chancellor to turn our economy around, and I am absolutely determined to finish that job.
So is the message to your critics, judge me in 3 years' time, judge me on the whole piece, the whole Parliament, and see what I have achieved?
Yes, but of course, people will judge me on my budget as well. And I hope that when they see the choices I make in that budget, that we have prioritised growth to get us out of the low productivity, low wage spiral that we risk falling into, that we've done that in a fair way, and that we're tackling those triple challenges of the cost of living, NHS waiting lists and too high national debt. And I believe we can make progress in all of those areas despite the challenges that have come our way this last year.
You've got different audiences today. You've got the public, obviously, but you've also got the bond markets who have so far responded quite well to what you said this morning. But you've also got, you talk in your speech about politicians having to get the message as well. And I wonder if there's a message to your own backbenchers there who have refused to allow you to push down the welfare bill, which is running dangerously at the moment, and the bond markets are very worried about that. Are you saying to your backbenchers, you have to show discipline and you have to show loyalty in these very, very tough times on behalf of the whole people?
Well, I'm Chancellor in the world as it is, not in the world that I might like it to be. But we are all politicians and we are all citizens in the world as it is. And we are confronted with choices every single day. You choose one thing, it means you can't do another, and you can't get away from that. I'll make my choices in the budget, and myself and the Prime Minister and the government will make our choices. People don't just have to suck those up, absolutely not. People will make their own decisions about what they believe is right or wrong. But what we all have to face is that there are choices and there are consequences of all decisions. On welfare, I don't think there's a single Labour MP who thinks that the welfare system that we inherited from the Tories is working today. It's not working for the most sick and disabled. It's not working for those who could work if the proper support was available. It's certainly not working for young people, where 1 in 8 young people are not in education, employment or training. So it needs to be reformed. The lesson is that we need to take people with us on that journey, but the lesson is certainly not that we should give up on reform. That would be the wrong decision, wrong for people in receipt of benefits, wrong for taxpayers and wrong for our economy.
The bit of the whole welfare bill that seems to be increasing fastest is actually for pensioners. It's now £177 billion a year we're spending on pensioners, and it's gone up from about 2% of GDP in the 50s and 60s to north of 8% now. So it's growing very, very fast. Yesterday, very interesting, Reform said they would look again at the triple lock because it was becoming, as many economists say, completely unaffordable. But the Labour Party won't, the Tory Party won't. Isn't there a kind of conspiracy about this?
Well, we made a commitment to keep the triple lock for this Parliament, and we remain committed to that.
Is that wise?
Now, there is a Pensions Commission at the moment looking, for example, automatic enrolment into pensions. Many people are reliant on means-tested benefits in retirement because they haven't had the opportunity to save for their retirement during their working lives, and that's why automatic enrolment. It's also why the pensions reform, so that when people save for a pension, they get a better return, is so important. And it's why successive governments have gradually lifted the state pension age to keep the system affordable. So all of those things are tools at our disposal. But the key thing is that more people in their working lives earn enough to be able to set something aside for the future. And when they do so, that money works well for them.
Over the next month, there is going to be a huge conversation, as you know, about Trump.
The estate agent has also put out a statement saying that, they had said they were going to get the licence and they didn't. That was an oversight on their part. I recognise, though, that the responsibility ultimately is on me to do that. And so I'm not putting any blame on them. I'm just saying what the facts of the case are.
And coming back one last time to the absolutely fundamental question about today, could you actually break a manifesto promise and keep the trust of the British people?
Well, it's up to the British people to decide. I'm not going to say what judgment they can or should take, but I think the British people are wise and they consider things in the round. And they kicked out the last government because they made a mess of the economy and they put the political interest before the national interest. I could be one of those chancellors as well, but I want to be the chancellor that does the right thing by our country and leaves our economy in a better state in which I found it. And I believe that the choices that I will make on the 26th of November will fulfil that.
I think you have been as candid as you could possibly be under the circumstances. Chancellor, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, Andrew.
And that interview has already put the cat amongst the pigeons, or at least roused LBC listeners. Here are a few examples. This is from Phil via WhatsApp. She doesn't have to raise taxes on middle incomes. She needs to tackle the city and the wealthiest. Income tax is not the only tax available. Caroline says, what's the alternative? Austerity to the point of a return to Dickensian slums? 14 years of austerity is what got us into this mess in the first place. But Mark, on the other side, is fairly unequivocal. We, the public, he said, do not have confidence in her. And of course, I want to carry on hearing from you, so please text me on 84850 or email marr@lbc.co.uk. Now, in a moment, we're going to hear the reaction of the former Labour leader, Lord Neil Kinnock. But first, let's hear the thoughts of our political editor, Natasha Clark. Natasha, your main takeaways.
I mean, what really struck out to me, Andrew, from that interview is that Rachel Reeves believes that she's bulletproof, doesn't she? That answer to you where she's saying, you know, what do you think would happen in the financial markets if I resigned? The day that she cried in the Commons changed British politics, and she now no longer is sackable. So that really struck out to me. Of course, on the taxes, everybody's been asking her all day, are you going to raise taxes? And she just doesn't want to. But actually, after your interview, I come out thinking that absolutely there is a really, really big chance that that is exactly what the Treasury is planning to do come the budget.
Yes, it's very, very difficult to get exact details out before a budget, but I got the impression that this is a woman who has taken the decision to go big. You know, she's not going to go for all the fiddly little thises and that. She's going to do something bold, possibly dangerous, but that she thinks could be decisive in terms of the public finances.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, saying that this budget is not going to be as bad, saying that that was a once in a Parliament budget. OK, well, that means that it's not going to be as bad as what we had 40 billion pounds worth of tax rises in the last budget. Saying it's not going to be as bad is probably not going to calm anyone down. Her refusing to rule out those taxes. I also thought another interesting line that you got out of her, Andrew, we shouldn't give up of reform of welfare. That is something which is having a huge debate within the Parliamentary Labour Party and indeed the government right now. The fact that basically this Tim's review has come out and already been started, and the government are not saying they're going to put any savings into this. The Chancellor clearly feels that there is nothing that she can do at the moment that is going to cut budgets. She's got no choice but to put up taxes.
Absolutely. I tried to get her to kind of give Labour MPs a kind of verbal spanking, but she just wouldn't go there either.
She would not. She basically said, look, this is up to you. This is up to, you know, all these Labour MPs, how they decide to treat it. And she also said it was up to the British public how they decide to review my budget after all. But actually, I don't think that's the case. I think she is absolutely unstoppable. I don't think she's going to be moved. Keir Starmer clearly saw the reaction to the markets, and that is exactly what this budget is about, and what the Treasury wants us to talk about today is why shoring up the Treasury, the economy for the long term is exactly what this budget is trying to do for this Chancellor.
She clearly believes she is doing the right thing, however embarrassing it might be. Natasha, thank you very much indeed for that. Let's now go to the person whose views on all of this we really, really want to hear. Laugh, 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 laugh. And that is Lord Neil Kinnock, former leader of the Labour Party, who I was watching this with me. Neil, what did you make of it?
I thought it was a very good interview. I mean, you were damn good at it. And I thought a lot of her answers were absolutely top class, because she's in the virtually impossible position of not being able to disclose just weeks before the budget.
Yes.
No Chancellor would. But at the same time, conveying a message about the principles that are guiding her in making the budget announcement. So I thought Rachel did very well, but I love her in any case. So
Indeed, but she, I can't remember a Chancellor doing this kind of thing. So
no, I don't either.
She was definitely trying to send a message, and it seemed to me very clear from the interview that the message is times are really, really tough. I'm going to take some big decisions. You may not like them, but judge us. You know, the alternative would be austerity, as one of our listeners was saying.
Which I think is a very good thing for a Chancellor to do.
And in terms of what she was saying, I said again and again, you know, the manifesto commitment, income tax, this every single time she certainly didn't say no. And I think that's what she's probably going to do.
Yeah, she can't say no, because if she's going to do anything in terms of changing the fiscal balance, then income taxes come into it. Now, it depends which income tax is at which end of the scale and what the juxtaposition of taxation is going to be. For instance, she could actually raise the so-called standard rate of income tax and cut national insurance. the effect of that would be to ensure that I would pay more tax.
Very, very good idea.
Because I'm not, as a retired person, paying any national insurance. So, I mean, you could generate 12, 15 billion on that basis by a very straightforward change that would ensure that those who can afford to pay more do, and those who can't don't.
But you could also say at the same time, I said I wouldn't raise income tax on working people, and I haven't.
Yeah, well, exactly. And I've had occasion several times in recent weeks when that has been raised with me, sometimes in broadcasts, to say, no, wait a minute, let's get back to the original text on working people, which means, of course, that she's got an area for operation which would include increased asset taxation. The case for that being, especially since I heard the Prime Minister last night saying that this is going to be a budget guided by Labour values, which are values of efficiency and equity. Now, if Rachel is going for greater fairness, which I would greatly applaud, and I think a lot of other people would too, then that must mean that she's looking at the reality that in the years since the financial crash, earned incomes have virtually stagnated in real terms, whereas asset values have rocketed.
House prices and the rest of it, absolutely.
Yeah, they've been touched.
Well, the Daily Telegraph is looking forward with great enthusiasm to those taxes coming in. If she went for income tax, by the way, it seems to me that she might as well go for 2p as 1p, because if you go for 1p, you get all the political hit, everyone gets outraged, but you don't get that much money. You might as well do it properly.
No, that's very good googly. You are not going to get me to endorse the idea that our Chancellor is going to increase income tax. I'm just saying, as I illustrated earlier, one of the possibilities would be for greater equity that would come out of changing the rate of income tax, but compensating by a cut in national insurance.
Let me ask you about Rachel herself, because she's somebody who is under extraordinary pressure, really, and she has two, as it were, hostile audiences, both glaring at each other. On the one hand, the bond markets, and she said to me, more or less as a joke, I think we're friends at the moment, she said. And certainly the bond price would suggest that today. But at the same time, she's got Labour backbenchers who are determined to protect welfare spending.
Yes.
And she has to look in both directions all the time. I guess you have to go back to Dennis Healey, who was in such a difficult position back in 1975.
Yes.
Do you see echoes of that here?
No, I think by her firmness and her whole approach to her responsibilities, she is absolutely, rootedly a reassurance to the markets. No question at all about that. Which does give her the room to be able to accommodate the changes in demand on welfare expenditure, which are very substantial. For instance, child poverty, which is real, it's hugely extensive, 4 million kids who are living in classically defined poverty. And the Labour members of Parliament, and I think a lot of others as well, are wanting that to be addressed. Now, so Rachel can only do that on the basis of a firmness which will convince the markets, which will give her the room to be, I'll use the word, generous or more generous so far as welfare expenditure is concerned.
It's an agonisingly difficult balance to have to maintain week by week by week, isn't it?
Yeah. It's a good job she's a tough lady.
She's certainly a tough lady. Thinking also about some of the other possibilities ahead, it was really interesting. Nigel Farage said two things. You're not allowed to laugh until I've asked the question.
Okay.
Nigel Farage said, I thought, two interesting things yesterday. One, they are no longer committing to the triple lock on pensions, which I, for one, think is a good thing. I think the triple lock is unaffordable. I'm sad that Rachel Reeves and the Labour Party and the Tories cannot confront that truth. But the other thing he said is he thinks that in this tension between the bond markets wanting to squeeze, and Labour MPs, there will be a kind of blow-up, and there'll be an economic crisis or collapse by 2027 and an earlier general election. Your sage comments on both of those.
It won't be the first time that Nigel Farage is wrong. He was categorically and gigantically, historically wrong about Brexit. Everything was going to be great. And instead of that, the Chancellor of the Exchequer is losing 80 billion a year in tax receipts, and our growth rate is depressed, according to the Office of Budget Responsibility and every other analyst. The guy is a profound fantasist. I was laughing because it had gone through my head earlier today when I'd seen his march back on the undertakings they gave as recently as the local government elections this year about the £20,000 starting rate for income tax and all that innumerate rubbish. But I thought, God, this guy used to be an insurgent and now he's insolvent. And I think that's a very nice play on words. I mean, you can discard any kind of economic advice or hope of fiscal rectitude so far as Nigel Farage is concerned. The man's a walking mirage.
And that leads me to final question, which is about where we are politically. As you know, your party is way down in the opinion polls.
Yes.
There are four parties, really, the Tories, Labour, the Greens, and the Liberal Democrats, all clustered around about the same numbers, and then Reform above them. We're now in a five-party system. What do you think is the route back for Labour to win in that really weird system that we're now in?
Achievement. There's no doubt at all about it. Achievement showing in clear and practical terms that the commitment that's been made, the record public sector investment being undertaken is making a difference to the lives that people are conducting. And that will take time, but it will occur. Now, without that achievement, of course, things would be hopeless. But they will achieve. And while they're doing it, the second thing they've got to do is to keep on explaining to the public, explaining all the time exactly what has happened, what is going on, that the British public are being treated like adults who know that there's a huge job of repair to be done, that it will take money, which is being committed, and it will take time because there are no miracles on offer.
Neil Kinnock, it's always a delight to have you in the studio. Thank you very, very much indeed for that. Up next, a former NATO Secretary General will be with me in the studio, and he has a stark warning about Putin's plans for Europe. Time now, 6:31, and Tim Humphrey has your news headlines.
The Chancellor has again refused to rule out tax rises in the budget later this month and has admitted to Andrew the economy is in a mess. Rachel Reeves says she won't return to austerity and she doesn't want to increase government debt. She also said she wouldn't resign if she did raise taxes. Volodymyr Zelensky says the US needs to be open to supplying Ukraine with long-range weapons. At a meeting at the White House last week, the Ukrainian president lobbied for Tomahawk missiles but was unsuccessful. The UN's warning the world is on track for 2.8 degrees of warming this century under current policies. That's a fall from last year's prediction of 3.1 degrees, but the organisation's environment programme says progress is still nowhere near fast enough. LBC weather cloudy tonight with rain moving eastwards, clearest in northern Scotland and a low of 6 degrees.
On the latest episode of The Newsagents.
Did you listen to the Chancellor's speech? Well, we did, and we're none the wiser. We still don't know if she's going to put up taxes in November, and if so, which ones? Join in to hear our analysis of what is actually going on in the Treasury.
Get the latest episode of The Newsagents with Emily Maitlis, John Sopel and Lewis Goodall. Listen or watch on our free Global Player app or the new LBC app.
For the nappies, peekaboos and tea parties. Mess, tantrums and sleepless nights. All those yo-yos, action figures and shinies. Lifts to mates, lifts to parties, lifts everywhere. For each and every one of those teenage years. Let's be honest. You probably owe your parents one. So tell them about pension credit. It could boost their pension income by an average of over £4,000 a year. Pension credit. Credit where credit's due. Eligibility criteria apply.
At Pets in a Pickle, we're here when it matters most. For fuss-free pet insurance policies as unique as they are, visit petsinappickle.co.uk.
Train to Chichester, flasks filled, snacks packed, all ready for Maisie's first stargazing adventure.
Come on, Maisie! Follow everyone up to the top of that hill.
Oh, look, that one's the plough.
Shooting star! Wow!
Made it. Last train back and feeling cosmic. And it seems we have an astronaut in the making. Download the Southern Railway app to book kids' tickets for £2 on off-peak journeys. Southern Railway, where every stop is a story.
Tonight's Euro Millions jackpot is £74 million. I think that deserves a whoop whoop. Whoop whoop! Thank you, faraway person. Get in tonight's Euro Millions draw. Play on app.
Estimated jackpot. Account terms, rules and procedures apply. Players must be 18 or over.
Tonight with Andrew Marr. Watch live on both Global Player and the new LBC app.
6:34. My next guest tonight is a worried man. Anders Fogh Rasmussen is a former Secretary-General of NATO and a former Danish Prime Minister who's now advising President Zelensky in Ukraine. He thinks that Russia might attack a NATO member in Europe before 2030, and he said that politically we are in a very sad place, and he joins me now. Mr. Rasmussen, thank you very much for coming in. A sad place refers to a certain weakness, does it, in terms of European political leadership and Russia?
Yeah, unfortunately, European leaders in general are very weak at home. President Macron, Prime Minister Starmer, who I really commend for their leadership of building a coalition of the willing, they have the problem that they seem to be a bit weak at home. So they are strong, I would say very strong abroad, but weak at home.
And is this connected to the rise also of populist parties who are often instinctively more pro-Putin?
Yes, unfortunately. So in a pessimistic perspective, we might see populist governments in one or two big European countries in the near future.
We appear to be in a situation in Europe where we cannot fully trust President Trump on Ukraine. He changes his mind a lot. Sometimes he's got a very warm relationship with President Putin and they're best friends. Sometimes he gets angry and thinks he's being played, but you can never tell. In that situation, what do the European members of NATO need to do?
The conclusion is very clear. We need to stand on our own feet. And it's high time. I mean, Europe has for too long harvested the peace dividend and been too reliant on cheap security from the US, cheap energy from Russia, cheap goods from China. That model doesn't work any longer. We have to reduce our dependency on others and be able to take care of our own security.
So it's an era of retrenchment and rebuilding for Europe. In terms of defence, the Germans have said that they are radically raising their defence budgets, but do you not see that happening across Europe? Certainly the Poles are doing so. They're on the front line, of course.
Yeah, but actually we do see a movement in the right direction. At the Hague NATO summit earlier this year, it was decided to raise the target of defense investment from the current 2% of GDP till 3.5% in hard security, and on top of that, 1.5% in defense-related infrastructure investments. That's a good decision, and we are walking in the right direction.
The question is how fast we walk and how far. I suppose I was just talking just now to the Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, and, you know, the pressures on the British government in terms of spending are really intense. And I know that in the British defence industries, you know, people are very pleased by the commitments that Sir Keir Starmer has made, but are worried as to whether they will actually be fulfilled. So what would you say to somebody listening who thinks, do you know what, life is tough, I can't really afford much more, I don't think this is a moment to be spending more on defence? What would you say to them the real risk is?
But the real risk is an attack on European countries. We shouldn't make any mistake. Putin will not stop in Ukraine. If he gets any success in Ukraine, then he will continue. So this is...
And where do you think he'd go next?
Yeah, Moldova, Georgia, where he is already. And then maybe the Baltic states. So at the end of the day, it is Europe's security that is at stake. And I would say, if we do not dramatically change our approach and strategy, then we are in for, I would say, an everlasting war in Ukraine. That is what is at stake.
An everlasting war?
Yes, because Putin doesn't want peace. As long as he believes he can win on the battlefield, he has no incentive whatsoever to engage constructively in a peace process. And that's why we must change his calculus by supporting Ukraine much more and by putting more pressure on Putin.
I think historical analogies never quite work, but do you think, in a sense, that we're in a 1930s position when your country and this country and many more were watching Germany rearm and rearm and rearm, but really not doing very much until the last minute?
Exactly. I think there are too many similarities between the 30s, the run-up to the Second World War, and today's world. And we should learn lessons from the past. And the lesson is, appeasement with dictators does not lead to peace. On the contrary, it leads to war and conflict because dictators have a big appetite.
Let me come down, as it were, from the level of geopolitics to hard military questions. In terms of what Europe needs to do to defend herself, not necessarily even the front line, is the main answer missile defences, missile shields, missile domes like they've got in Israel? How worried are you about the undersea cable issue, which crisscrosses the Baltic and the North Sea and indeed the Atlantic? What would you be most worried about? Where do you think we should be spending money first?
All over the place. But first and foremost, this is about defeating Putin. And to that end, we need to provide Ukraine with long-range missiles. I appreciate very much the UK leadership in this. That should be followed by delivery of German long-range Taurus missiles, American Tomahawks. In addition to that, we should help the Ukrainians defend themselves against Russian missiles and drones. And we should, based on a coalition of the willing, deploy a reassurance force to Ukraine, not at the front line, but behind the Ukrainians.
Even though Moscow says that's completely unacceptable, whatever kind of peace deal we strike.
Yes, because this is not for Putin to decide. If we make the deployment of a reassurance force dependent on Putin's consent, then we give him a further incentive to continue the war to avoid such a reassurance force.
And when it comes to the Americans, there are some things that they can do and we can't. So you would presumably want, all their logistics and their military jets and so forth still to be available under all circumstances.
Well, it would, of course, strengthen a reassurance force if it were to be backed up by American help in sharing intelligence, space surveillance, air defense, etc. I would say even an American declaration that we, the Americans, will help the Europeans if Putin were to attack a European reassurance force, that would be pretty close to an Article 5 guarantee.
Yeah. This has been a very serious conversation. Finally and very quickly, are you an optimist or a pessimist about our current situation in Europe?
I would quote Winston Churchill, who said, "I'm an optimist. There is no reason to be otherwise."
No reason to be otherwise. Anders Fogh Rasmussen, thank you very, very much indeed for coming in and talking to LBC tonight. Now, there is a new group on the block outside Parliament, a lot of pink and banners proclaiming the Mothers Manifesto. This is a campaign fundamentally about food security, getting children enough to eat everywhere. Emma Hopkins, the co-founder and primary organiser of the Mothers Manifesto, who are lobbying in Parliament today, joins me now. Welcome. I was accosted by your colleague
on here. It's wonderful to be able to come and speak about this. We started in 2023 really with an idea that mothers had a really powerful voice and one of care and compassion, and that we needed more of that in the world. So we started in 2023 with a 6-day hunger strike of mothers. Really with an idea in the December, and by Mother's Day we held a 6-day strike in solidarity with all mothers that are struggling to feed themselves and their children, both here in the UK and globally. And since then, we've been acting to try and put pressure both from inside in terms of policy change and also building our connections with different organisations who are also working towards this and doing incredible work, both in the UK and globally, around what we can be doing about this. Yes, today... Oh, sorry, Carol.
I was going to say, in a sense, and I don't mean this in any way sneeringly, but in a sense, you're politicising Mother's Day. You're saying mothers have agency beyond being celebrated once a year.
I mean, I think the thing, that mothers stand for, the sort of iconic idea of what mothers stand for is around caring, is around protecting. And as a mother, there is nothing that is more critical, and I'm sure for fathers too, than to care for our child and to be able to give them what they need.
And is
some mothers, we are able to do that. But for many, many mothers, 7 million families in this country are struggling to afford the essentials. So that's nutritious food, housing, rent, for their families. So mothers are, families are going into unmanageable debt. Yes, it's a huge issue in this country. And of course, globally, we know that mothers are not only skipping meals to feed their children, which is happening a lot here. They are... there is simply nothing at all, and children are starving. So,
I think I read more than 2 million children die every year from malnutrition, and malnutrition accounts for 45% of children's deaths, which is an astonishing figure. So it's a very, very important issue. We could talk at great length about policies here in Britain, but we don't have time. All I can say is thank you very much indeed for talking to LBC, and I hope everybody goes online and looks up the Mothers Manifesto. Thank you. Now then, coming up, one of the most powerful vice presidents of the modern era has died, and I'll be remembering him with LBC's Washington correspondent next. But before we go to the break, let's just hear a few more of the comments that have been pouring in about that interview. And essentially, if you like Rachel Reeves, you like her even more tonight. And if you dislike her, you dislike her more. Here, Michael in South Wales says, Rachel Reeves is a wonderful Chancellor. Matthew says, after that interview, I have faith restored in Rachel. She feels honest, humble and full of integrity, something we've not seen in Chancellors for a long time. Let's see what the budget brings and judge on that. But Science St Helens says she's not going to be in that job this time next year. She's basically admitted income tax is going up. Between that and the local and Senate elections next year, next autumn, Labour will be in power, but the country will have a different Prime Minister and a different Chancellor. That's Si's view. And finally, Lee sent us this by WhatsApp. Rachel was keen to state the triple lock will remain as stated in their manifesto. Not so keen to guarantee her commitment not to raise income tax. That was also in their manifesto, pitting the young against the old. Terrible news. And many more in that vein. Let's now hear from... Let's go to the break now. Time is 6:47.
Coming up at 7 on LBC, Ali Mirage.
The Chancellor says each of us must do our bit for the security of our country. Do you applaud the honesty? And the government wants to encourage greater take-up of the arts over languages in schools. Would you welcome it?
Ali Mirage at 7. Listen on our free Global Player app or our new LBC app.
Amazon offers term time working to their employees, like Anton, who's home to look after his daughters during their holidays.
Hello?
To him, this is the best sound in the world. Actually, maybe that's the best sound of all. Now that's term time working, offered at Amazon. 10 weeks off guaranteed per year, mix of paid holiday and unpaid time off. Conditions apply.
How's the business going? We're busier than ever, but struggling to get the staff we need. Recruiting can be such a distraction. We gave Job Centre Plus a try, and they've really helped us out. Really? Yeah, it was dead easy. We got our own employer advisor, Julie, who helped advertise our jobs, shortlisted candidates for us, and let us interview at the Job Centre. We've hired some great people, and Job Centre Plus really took the hassle out of it, and there was no fee.
Brilliant. That's straight on my to-do list.
Find out more at business.gov.uk/recruit. Eligibility criteria apply.
A Southern train is a place where you can have more me time. A chance to skip traffic and glide to wherever you need to be, with headspace to focus on more important matters, like if that cloud is a starfish or sunflower. Fast journeys without the rush with great deals at southernrailway.com. Terms apply.
When you're smiling. Banning Dental Group clinics with over 5,000 top-rated Google reviews. Keep on smiling.
Leading Britain's conversation, LBC, tonight with Andrew Marr.
6:49. One of the most divisive and powerful Republicans in recent American history, Dick Cheney, has died at 84. He was Vice President to George W. Bush and heavily influential in starting the Iraq War and opening the Guantanamo Bay Detention Center, where waterboarding was regularly used. A lifelong right-winger, he was once described by the Washington Post as a moderate and wrote to them demanding a correction. Let's talk now to LBC's Simon Marks in Washington. Simon, one of the figures who many people thought was really running the George W. Bush administration rather than the president.
Yes, remember, Andrew, that he basically selected himself to be George W. Bush's running mate. George Bush reached out to him and said, I'd like you to come aboard and help me draft a list of possible vice presidential picks. And by the time that process was over, Dick Cheney was going to George Bush to say, I've looked, and honestly, I think the best man for the job is Dick Cheney. So that's how he ended up at George W. Bush's side. He was often thought of as being the brains behind the operation. I've always thought that those claims were somewhat overstated, but there is no question that in an earlier era of American politics, when the excesses of President Donald Trump were unimaginable, Dick Cheney was viewed as someone who really wanted to push to see just how much power the executive, the president and the vice president, could amass. For millions of people, he goes to his grave an unindicted war criminal. Many people out there saying they believe that absolutely war crimes charges should have been brought against him because of the decision to invade Iraq after 9/11, despite the absence of the weapons of mass destruction that George W. Bush and Dick Cheney insisted the world was going to find there. In 2011, he told CNN he had no regrets.
It's the Middle East, and stuff happens in the Middle East. I don't think you can make a case that the world would be better off today if Saddam Hussein were still in power.
So no regrets about Iraq?
I think we made exactly the right decisions.
And Dick Cheney, as you were saying, did push back at the notion that he was anything other than a hardliner. He particularly enjoyed being compared to Darth Vader from Star Wars. That was very much part of the Prince of Darkness brand that he espoused when he was at George W. Bush's side for 2 successive terms in the White House.
And he was also, I think, kind of under the wing for a long time of Donald Rumsfeld, who is somebody that people will remember from that same period. Do you think that effectively he was running the White House, or he was running foreign policy, at least during George W. Bush's time, at least for a few years?
Well, I think he was certainly very influential in terms of foreign and defence policy. And he and Donald Rumsfeld, of course, both had associations with American politics that stretched all the way back to the Nixon era where they had met. There were things that George W. Bush wanted to do that Dick Cheney facilitated, including, for example, making historic humanitarian and developmental interventions in Africa. You wouldn't necessarily think that was part of Dick Cheney's agenda. And then, out of power, he will best be remembered for being one of the most prominent anti-Trump Republican voices. Here's Dick Cheney speaking in a video advertisement in which he was actually endorsing his own daughter, Liz Cheney, running for Congress in Wyoming back in 2022.
In our nation's 246-year history, there has never been an individual who is a greater threat to our republic than Donald Trump. He tried to steal the last election using lies and violence to keep himself in power after the voters had rejected him. He is a coward. A real man wouldn't lie to his supporters. He lost his election, and he lost big. I know it, he knows it, and deep down, I think most Republicans know it.
And Andrew, not a word today yet from the White House about the demise of Dick Cheney.
Well, an extraordinary day for Republican politics, and whatever you thought of him, a very, very powerful man. Simon Marks, thank you so much for that. And now, just before we go, let's have a quick listen back to some of the conversation I had earlier with the Chancellor after her historic pre-budget address. We sat down together for an exclusive chat, and I asked her if she would lose the trust of the British people if she went back on her manifesto commitments on tax.
I think people want to understand what we're doing and why. People voted Labour last year because they were sick to the back teeth of the previous government and their mismanagement, and then putting party interest above the national interest. Now, I'm sure that I could fiddle the numbers and move things around to meet the letter of the rules, but not the spirit of them.
You could dodge through, but you're not going to dodge through.
You know what I could do, and it's what previous chancellors do. They say that big capital project, the nuclear power station, the Northern Powerhouse rail, the 1.5 million new homes.
Put it
back a couple of years. Massage the figures. Of course, you could do that. Chancellors have done it before. Do you know why we're in the mess we're in now? Because that is what they did. And I am not going to do it, because one day I won't be in this office, Andrew. One day I won't be in this office. I won't be Chancellor anymore. And I want people to look back and what did Rachel achieve when she was Chancellor of the Exchequer? And I want to have left this country in a better state. And that is something, frankly, that the last two Chancellors haven't been able to say.
On that very theme, let me say something that interviewers don't normally say, which is that I think of all the bad choices that may be ahead of you in terms of taxes, actually raising income tax for everybody by a modest amount may be the least bad choice you could make. However, you did make that promise, as did Keir Starmer. So it's been suggested to me what you could do is you could say to the British people on Budget Day, look, things are really bad. The headwinds have been harder. The situation has been stronger, worse than I thought. Therefore, I have to raise income tax. But I promised you I wouldn't. So tomorrow, I'm going to resign as Chancellor of the Exchequer, having done the right thing. That would be. I'm not going to behave like the last lot. I'm not going to play those games. I'm going to be honest and honourable.
And what do you think would happen in financial markets if I did that?
It depends who took over, I guess.
Oh, come on, Andrew. You know, look, I have been able to build a reputation that I can be trusted with the public finances. I've steered this country, our economy, through some challenging times the last 15 months. Increases in global tariffs, increases in volatility, increased tensions around the world, and yet our bond yields are lower than they were a few months ago and have outperformed our peers. The FTSE is close to record highs. Our economy in the first half of this year was the strongest growing in the G7. So I am not going to walk away because the situation is difficult. I was appointed as Chancellor to turn our economy around, and I am absolutely determined to finish that job.
So is the message to your critics, judge me in 3 years' time, judge me on the whole piece, the whole Parliament, and see what I have achieved?
Yes, but of course people will judge me on my budget as well. And I hope that when they see the choices I make in that budget, that we have prioritised growth to get us out of the low productivity, low wage spiral that we risk falling into, that we've done that in a fair way, and that we're tackling those triple challenges of the cost of living, NHS waiting lists and too high national debt. And I believe we can make progress in all of those areas despite the challenges that have come our way this last year.
Rachel Reeves there, I thought she was a woman who has taken some big decisions and is apprehensive about them, but not arrogant. LBC's political editor, Natasha Clark, is back with me, and now Natasha Clark, I mumbled that before. What are the opposition parties saying about what we've just heard?
Yeah, I mean, Andrew, obviously yours is the only interview with the Chancellor that's been out today, so obviously your lines this evening really making waves amongst Westminster. The Conservatives have responded to me tonight, talking about the job that Rachel Reeves believes she's finishing. Obviously that's in response to you saying to you that she won't be quitting. They say that that's dragging the tax burden ever higher, loading more and more debt onto the next generation, and stubbornly refusing to get a grip of spending. Keir Starmer once said honesty and integrity were important in politics. If Reeves puts up taxes and doesn't resign, the Prime Minister should find a backbone and sack her. I've also just got a comment in from Richard Tice, of course. He is leading on the economy for the Reform Party. He tells me that Rachel Reeves must own her own disastrous mistakes in front of the nation, apologise and boldly change course.
Overall, not very positive.
Overall, not very positive, just like you'd expect for all the opposition parties, but certainly making waves, Andrew.
Indeed, Natasha. Thank you very much indeed. Now, if you've missed any of today's show and our exclusive interview with the Chancellor, you can watch it back in full on the YouTube channel, as well as our free Global Player app or the new LBC app, where you can stay up to date with all the latest news and opinion. You can put your news categories in the order you want them. You can pause, you can rewind live radio, and you can listen to a range of podcasts. So download the all-new official LBC app for free from your app store now. Coming up at 10 on LBC, Ben Kentish. But right now, it's time for Ali Mirage.
Thanks, Andrew. The Chancellor has paved the way for substantial tax rises, warning that each